Keep going. You can do it. The best is yet ahead of you. Lean into community and your values. The journey is worth the struggle, the achievement is worth the fight, or for personal and academic growth or progress. Welcome to a podcast of the ages, a conversation of the time, a moment of transformation, an experience of the time, an opportunity for the better. This is the New Student Pharmacist Podcast Experience.
Purpose of these episodes not at all for advice or medical suggestions. These are aimed to provide support to peer pharmacists in training in educational and intellectually stimulating ways. Again, these are not at all for medical advice or medical suggestions. Please see your local board and state-certified health professional. The views of this podcast represent those of my guests and I.
Welcome to the podcast series The New Student Pharmacist, where we discuss chemistry and pharmacy, as well as leaders in pharmacy careers, community, and chemistry and pharmacy research. We encourage you to support the work we are doing and follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts by subscribing for free. Note, the views on the podcast represent those of my guest and I.
Okay, welcome to the New Student Pharmacist Podcast Experience. It's so good to have you listening in today. My guest today is Mr. Paul Neal, owner of Vantage Point Commercial Capital. He's also the host of the Brick and Mortar Money Show podcast. He's definitely accomplished in his field. Paul Neal is the owner of Vantage Point Commercial Capital and a trailblazer in empowering business owners to create wealth, autonomy, and control by owning their own commercial space. Not just an expert in commercial real estate, Paul is a master at making complex topics accessible and engaging. That's very powerful. His new book, Unleash Your Business, Unlock Wealth, Autonomy, and Control by Buying Your Building and Firing Your Landlord, delves into this transformative approach to commercial property ownership. Wow. The podcast guest, he brings a lot to the table. So I'm happy to have him. Welcome, Mr. Paul Neal.
Yeah. Hey, David. I'm excited to be here today. Excited to talk to young budding professionals and entrepreneurs.
Yeah. So my question to you is, can you give us a quick snapshot of your career trajectory and your life story? Well, what can you give us before we delve deep into like the transitions and the steps you took? What story could you share with us about your career that has really influenced and impacted you to the point where you have made these strides?
Yeah, sure. So I think it all began even sort of pre-career when I was young, I, for whatever reason, always had this desire to want to be free and do a lot of things and not be limited by what other people said I could do or have or whatnot. And so that was always kind of my underlying motivation, still is today. And so I thought my career path was to study engineering and work in the field of engineering. That's what I studied in college. My father was an engineer. Honestly, I didn't know a lot about it and what they did. I just was pretty good at math and science. And I thought, well, maybe I can use this to, invent something or whatnot and, and pursue my dreams and visions. And so went down that road and started working out in the field. And you want a story? So sort of a pivotal moment for me was as a newly sort of minted. In fact, actually, this was before I even finished school. I was in the co-op program, and one of the companies that I worked for, sort of like our co-op program was like an internship. And so, but you would work a quarter, and then we were on the quarter system back then. So you'd work a quarter, and then you're in school for 2 quarters, and then you're back at the company. So I was sitting in a conference room that had about 8 people in it, and we were in there, and we were designing these network test boxes, and this is sort of when at the beginning of the internet, when it started to become a big thing, and these were custom designed for large companies. So each box was like $80,000, and you would make some different changes and whatnot on it. Well, the thing was, David, we sat around the room, and I was mostly sort of a bystander because I was, again, co-oping. They argued for 2 to 3 hours, it seemed like an eternity, about the color of the little yellow or the little rubber booties that went on this $80,000 box. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I was like, is this going to be what I'm going to do, as an engineer? And so it really kind of made a deep impression on me at that point that I needed to do something on my own and go out into business. And actually was the catalyst for me to do that and start looking at, how can I go into business for myself and own my own future. And that was kind of the one catalytic story.
Wow, that's good. That's good. I can relate in some ways. I started off doing engineering for the first 2.5 years of my career, and then I transitioned off to biochemistry, and it's been an interesting journey, a good and interesting ever since. Now I'm in pharmacy school. So yeah, that's a very interesting point that you made. So as an entrepreneur yourself, how do you manage or how do you approach risk management when it comes to investing in commercial properties or investing in general? What's your framework? So obviously you've made some strategies, you've had some success, you've had a great degree of success. So how do you manage risk, even when it comes to like taking on new opportunities, on new investment opportunities, on new business opportunities, on new clients? How are you like framing risk in your approach?
Yeah. So I always sort of try to begin with the end in mind and say, okay, what is the outcome? What is the best possible outcome that can come from this scenario?
Okay.
And then on one side, and then what's the worst possible outcome, that can happen? And what's sort of the likely outcome? And I try to sort of run these scenarios, particularly like in finance, we can look a lot at numbers, and numbers will tell the story a lot. And all investments are really, they should be numbers driven, right? They shouldn't really be emotionally driven. Emotions will lie to you, right? And they do frequently. And unfortunately, too many of us listen to our emotions. In fact, I think it was Warren Buffett that said, and he may not have been the original minter of this, but he said, be greedy when others are fearful and fearful when others are greedy when it comes to investments. And so, when everybody's on the bandwagon, that's the time to get off the bandwagon. And when nobody's on the bandwagon, that's the time to be looking to get in, right? So So it's counterintuitive to what we feel, and which is hard because you're like, man, this just feels like the wrong thing to do. So then you have to then default to, okay, again, the logic, the numbers, what are we investing in? We focus mostly in real estate, and real estate is, there's an art to it, but there's a whole lot of science to it. Like a lot of people will invest in real estate based on speculation, right? Like, I'm going to buy this property and I think it's in a good area, and I'm sure in 5 years it's going to be worth a lot more money. Well, that's a very sort of warm and fuzzy, feel good way to approach it. And it may work and it may not work. It's a little like going to Las Vegas, right? I mean, you don't know. I mean, I can put my money on red 23 and black 15 and hope the little ball lands there, right? Because I got a feeling. But more importantly, it's to understand what drives that investment, what drives the real estate. So what if I'm buying a building or buying an investment property, for instance. I have a lot of young entrepreneurs and young professionals that once they start their careers are making some money and they want to start investing, and a lot of them want to start in real estate. And so a lot of them will start with a single family investment and whatnot. And my recommendation and what I help them do is to understand, let's look at the cash flow of this property. Let's look, you're going to invest a certain amount of money as a down payment. And that money could be invested somewhere else, right? You have all these options on where you could put your down payment money. And so there's an opportunity cost when you invest it in one thing and not the other. But then let's look at what are the rents you're going to bring in, how are the rents going to increase? And you can make some educated guesses on that based upon the market. And there are some things you can do to improve a property to also increase the rents. We can figure out very simply, what's the debt service going to be on that? What is the mortgage payment? We know what the taxes and the insurance are going to be. And so we can then run some models and say, okay, well, if rents go up by X%, then here's going to be your return. If they go up by, less than that, here's your return. If the property never appreciates $1, here's your return. But, what if it does appreciate 3% a year or whatever? What's the return there? So then you compare that to the other options that are out there. So it's a matter of really understanding, where you're putting your money is probably, and how that works and what are the possible outcomes. And then you're not eliminating risk, but at least you're mitigating risk. You're understanding, intelligently going in. And even so, you don't always win, but you win many more times than you lose when you go into it with that kind of an attitude.
That perspective.
Yeah. Because again, emotion, and I'm an emotional guy too, and I've made my share of mistakes, and that's it's always hard though to go left when everyone's going right, and vice versa. But that's where the money's made. And most wealth is made in down economies, not surging economies, because there's things are on sale. You have opportunities to buy things, and so many people that I know went in 2008 when real estate crashed, and they were buying properties literally for pennies on the dollar. And now those properties are worth a ton of money, and they did really, really well. But that's because they bought them when nobody wanted to buy them, when the market had fallen out. So
yeah. So I sound like I need to have you as a recurring guest, hopefully, on this podcast to talk more about money management and financial skills. This is good. So you talk about a range of possible outcomes. So and you use models, you said, to outline what are the possible outcomes. I was listening, I always admire people who are really knowledgeable in financial affairs or financial matters. I occasionally listen to Jamie Dimon. And he talks about how when he's writing his yearly report, a yearly letter to his stakeholders or shareholders, he looks at a range of possible outcomes, because in essence, you can't really predict the future, but you can look at a range of possible outcomes and make educated decisions based on that. That's very good. And you also bring up a second point in which you can mitigate risk. You can't really eliminate it, but you can mitigate it. So how often do you stress test these situations? Like, think about, if everything was to go wrong, what would be the end result? Do you stress test these financial models, or do you just look at, if this goes wrong or this goes wrong? Occasional.
Yeah. I mean, so most entrepreneurs are, very, they walk around with rose-colored glasses, right? And I tend to do that too. So, and that can be your friend. It motivates you to do things, but also can be your biggest enemy, right? Um, Instead of like focusing on sort of worst case scenarios, what we try to do is build margin into the numbers. So, for instance, like, I've talked to my daughter about this all the time. It's like, well, if we only need to drive across town, it's 10 minutes to get there for an appointment, but we're only allotting 10 minutes, then inevitably something's going to come up and we're going to be late. Something's going to happen, right? You've got to have some margin in case the unexpected happens, because it always does. Things never go as well as you expect. They never are as easy as you expect. And I laugh a lot at like you see on HGTV, the flipping home shows. And I think every show on that channel is now a flip show in a different city and a different personality or whatever. But they make it look so easy. And at the end of the day, I always laugh because when I talk to people that are really doing it, there's a lot of surprises along the way that you don't really know about, right? So that you open up this wall and turns out you've got an infestation of termites or whatever. You got to rewire the house or whatever. So margin's important. And the way we sort of mitigate it is you don't throw everything you got into a deal. You have to have some reserves on the sideline. So like financially, you want to have some liquidity. I call it dry powder. You want to have some cash on hand. As reserves, just in case things don't go well. You can generally weather your storm and get out of whatever situation you're in and be okay. When we do financial calculations, like on buying a commercial property, we look at what's called debt service coverage, and there's a margin in there. So basically, generally, the industry wants to see a 25% greater net revenue than your debt service. So there's this 25% would be your profit margin, but it's also a safety margin, right? Mm-hmm. So in the event that something goes south, there's still there's some extra reserves to fall back on, and that's built in up front. And so that's going to limit, like you see right now, a lot of banks are cutting back on the amount of money or the percentage of money that they're going to loan on a particular piece of property, which means the borrowers are having to come to the table with more down payment money or more liquidity into the deal, because the banks are like, we want a little more margin in case the property market doesn't go the way everyone wants it or hopes it to go. We're protected. And so as an investor, you have to kind of think the same way. You're like, okay, I know ideally what I want, but worst case scenario, this could happen. Most likely neither are going to work. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. And so let me just kind of plan on that and emotionally plan on that if I expect this one deal is going to be my ticket to ride, right? Mm-hmm. It probably won't be. But if you do enough of those deals, eventually, it works out generally in your favor.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, given that, so that's good. So given that you have experience and you've made some strides in the wealth management and wealth building space, what issues or problem or pain point areas can you identify within like the trajectory of like students, grad students, like budding professionals that you think your expertise really can contribute? Let me phrase it differently. So what advice do you have for people who are in that phase when it comes to wealth building? Because I'm not sure if I'm correct with this statement, but many times those are diametrically, or there's a dichotomy that's presented. Either you're in school or you're out of school and building wealth. So do you think they ever coincide in terms of building wealth in the school space or building wealth as you are in school? Is that even a possibility? Or is that just like a fanciful dream?
So I'm gonna maybe redefine the term, or define the term wealth. Wealth, your personal wealth is not just your bank statement and what you have in your personal financial statement. Okay. So the biggest advice, which answers this question, I think, in my mind, based on my experience and what I've seen, is that if you're a student and you're in school today and you're learning a trade or a profession or some specialty, you're learning something that you're going to be able to apply, and then this skill you'll be able to then go take what you've learned, your knowledge, and take it to the marketplace and basically trade that knowledge for income and a lifestyle, right? I mean, that's why most people do it. But here's the thing, what you have to realize if you're a student is that a lot of people, when they finish school, that's literally the last bit of learning that they ever do. And unfortunately, what you learn in school can be very effective in a trade, or like obviously you have to go to pharmacy school if you're going to be a pharmacist, so you have to do that. And I know pharmacists can do well financial, and it's a great career and all that. I know I have some friends that are. But what they don't teach you, and what I think you're doing here, which is awesome, is the bigger picture. And that is, hey, that's just one part of your overall life, right? And you want to take the opportunity to be a lifelong student on personal wealth, developing yourself in all areas, in your intellectual, in your physical, in your spiritual, in your emotional. Part of that is, investing and learning about other things outside of your trade. In your trade, you could do that for the rest of your life if that's what you want to do, and more power to you. But a lot of people may work in a field for a number of years and say, well, hey, now I want to leverage this and do something else. And if you've been smart with your decisions by continuing to educate yourself and get around people that have done things that you want to do, maybe inside and outside your field, then you grow. And as you be, then you will be able to do, and then you'll be able to have more. So the more you be, the more you can do, and the more you can have. A lot of people want to skip the be and the do and just get right to the have. And so what they do is, David, they go out and they get in debt and they come out. So you've been a student, a starving student, let's say, for all these years, and now you're finally making a decent salary, right? Like people are going to pay you money, and so what do? You go out and you buy a nice car and you do all this and you get the credit cards out, and that's the worst thing you can do. If you're going to do anything, my suggestion is put some money away. Even if you don't have a lot now, put it in your head, be thinking about it, planning on it, talking about it. And then when you do get the salary, your first investment ought to be into a house or somewhere you can live and buy, because now you're going to get on the equity train and start creating wealth in real estate. And that will open up amazing opportunities down the road for additional investments, whether it's in real estate or other things, because now your net worth is growing, whether you're doing anything or not, because you've got to live somewhere. So you're going to rent something, you're going to pay somebody rent, and their rent's going to go up every single year, and you've got no control, and you got no equity, and you got no tax advantages. Or you can buy a place, and when you're buying a property to live in, the mortgage terms are great, the down payment terms are low, you don't have to have a lot of that, and particularly if you're a professional, there are programs. I mean, you can get in for almost no money down, and so now you've got this property that's going to grow. It will grow in value over time, and you will pay down the loan over time. But a lot of people go out and they buy the car, and then it puts them in a position where they can't afford to go buy the house. And then so now they're already behind the curve, and you may have student loans and things like that. So you've already got some debt maybe you've got to deal with. But don't go out and get a bunch of other debt. Educate yourself and build the wealth of value in yourself. Wow. And you'd be amazed what could happen in 5 or 10 years after the fact.
Wow, good. Be, do, then have. So identity, action, and then acquisition. That's very good. It's very good. So, and I was learning about time management, because my parents made sure that I learned about time management from an early point in my career. And that has contributed to me being able to do the things that I've done so far, so early in my career. So when I was learning about time management, I learned the concepts of delegation and leverage. So delegating tasks to different people and leveraging people within your network to help you be more productive, basically. So I'm curious, how do those concepts interplay when it comes to money management? Because people say time is money, but I take it those concepts could be like, how do you use delegation when it comes to money management? How do you use leverage when it comes to money or acquiring money or being more productive to gain money? Where do you see those playing out even in your career or your experiences? How have you used
Yeah.
it?
Well, I would disagree on the popular saying that time is money.
Okay, okay,
Money is money. Time is life,
okay.
right? So you're trading your life for money, and it's interesting. There's a verse in the Bible that says redeeming the time, and so this idea of redeeming your time, you can buy back your life or your time with money, um, and you can get from here where I am in Virginia to Colorado, a lot of different ways. You can walk, you can ride a bike, you can drive, you can fly, um, and they all get you there.
Mm-hmm.
But they all get you there in different methodologies, but at different speeds and whatnot. So you could sort of the analogy would be leverage, and so as an individual, we have a limited amount of time in our life, right? And so you got 24 hours in a day. I don't care how smart you are or how gifted you are, or not, right? Same time, just like you learn time management. And by the way, your parents obviously were very, very wise people to really set you on that path, which is an advantage. So you learn leverage. And so there's a lot of ways to leverage. Like, for instance, simple one, like I don't cut my grass. I haven't cut my grass for decades. It's not because I don't like the smell of freshly mown lawns. It's not because I wouldn't mind getting out and getting a break and just like, oh, this is great. I feel like I accomplished something. It's cut the grass, looks great. But it's that hour or two that I could use to do something more effective with my time that's a higher value than something that, just pushing a lawnmower, which anybody can do, right? It's getting an assistant, like in a business. So if you're a pharmacist, having an assistant that can do a lot of the things that, the tasks that don't really require the level of education and decisioning that a pharmacist has to do, but stuff that still has to get done, right? So you can train someone to do that and leverage your time, and therefore maybe double your time. We have it in real estate too. That's why a lot of people like real estate investment, because for a small down payment, then you can leverage an asset that's much more valuable and take
Wow.
advantage of appreciation.
Mhm.
So for instance, if you were to buy, let's say you bought a $400,000 house,
Yeah. Choose
and you put
examples.
down,
Very good.
yeah, and you put down, let's say you're buying it for yourself. Let's say you put down 5%, so 20,000, or maybe even no money, but let's just say 5%, $20,000. So you put down $20,000, right, on this $400,000 house. But if you look at the average appreciation ratio based upon area that you live in the house and everything, but let's just say 3 to 4%. We'll say 4% to make the math work, or to make it easy. So a 4% appreciation on a $400,000 house is a $16,000 increase in the value of the property
Mhm.
every year,
Okay.
compound. So you
Wow.
invested 20, in the end of the year you made 16. So you made 16,000 on a $20,000 investment. Well, multiply that over 10 years, and now this property might be worth, 550,000, or I don't do the math in my head, but significantly more. You still only invested $20,000. So you leveraged a little bit, and you're able to leverage it versus putting 20,000 into the bank and getting a passbook savings rate, or even putting it into a stock, right? And let's say you can get yourself a 10% return, which is not easy. You're still only going to get $2,000 a year return on that $20,000 investment because it's not leveraged.
Wow.
So a lot of people like real estate from that standpoint, and then taking it to another level. If you buy an investment property, like a lot of young professionals will hack this, where they'll buy their first house knowing it's not their dream house, and they get in it for very little down, and then a year or two later they'll rent that house out and they'll go buy another house to live in. So they move to this other house, they've rented the first one, and then another year or two later they do the same thing, and they're continually sort of upgrading their lifestyle.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, you've got this trail of 1, 2, 3, 4, however many houses that are being rented, that are bringing in positive cash flow because the renters are paying the mortgage. And oh, by the way, they're probably appreciating also in the 3 to 4 to 5% range every year. So now you might have $1 million worth of assets that are appreciating, but you got in it for very little money and somebody else is paying for it. So that's an example of leverage. From a financial world, you can do it with options and things like that in the market too. And I'm not an expert there, so I'm not going to go there. But I know real estate. So, but anytime you can duplicate yourself or your efforts or energies through someone else or through some other technology, it's the way to go, because again, we only have 24 hours in a day, and there will come a time where most of your listeners will have families. If they don't have them now, they will want to spend time with their family and not working, 80, 100 hours a week, right? So you want to, but you want the lifestyle and you want everything and you want to go on vacation. And so you want, your business or your income to continue to go. So that's kind of the idea of leverage, and you can do it with people, you can do it with assets, and you can do it like, I'll give you another example. So like the book, like you mentioned, the book I wrote. So the book is leverage. So the book, people can go out and get the book that are interested in maybe buying the commercial space that they're running. Let's say you have a pharmacy. You're a pharmacist, you come out of school and you're working for a company and you've done great there for 2-3 years. And you're like, hey, I'm going to start my own pharmacy here in town. And you go out and do that, and you're going to lease space for a few years, which is the right thing to do because you got to get your business going and profitable. But once you're going and profitable and you've had it going for a few years, you're like, okay, wow, now I'm spending all this money on rent. What if I own the building that my pharmacy was in? Because I've got to pay rent to somebody, and it's not that much different than owning your own home. And so I got this book out there that we haven't met, but you happen to find it on Amazon or whatever, and you read the book, you're like, oh, I didn't realize I could do this. And so you reach out to me or someone else who wrote a book or something. And so there's leverage of like, oh, it's working for me and I'm not there doing it. Kind of thing.
Wow. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, definitely get the book, folks. Get the book. Purchase the book. So yeah, as we start to wrap up, you host your own podcast. What led you to start your podcast? And the podcast is the Brick and Mortar Money Show podcast. So what led you to start your podcast?
Yeah, Brick and Mortar Money Show podcast. No, that's a great question, David. I love this. I love talking to people and engaging to people and learning and really just highlighting people that are doing amazing things, because again, I learn and people learn, and I think the more we can learn from each other, the better off we all are. Most of my clients and friends and the people I work with, kind of my tribe, are business owners and entrepreneurs and professionals, high-performing professionals. And so our show is really geared around sort of the confluence of business ownership and creating wealth through property ownership. Because as you'll find, again, as your careers continue to grow and you guys start making a lot of money, you're going to want to do something with it that's productive. And so a lot of people, everyone's putting money in 401ks and all that. And that has its pluses and minuses for sure. But then a lot of people want real estate because they can taste it, touch it, feel it, see it. And in a lot of areas, from commercial to a lot of vacation homes, things like that, people doing all kinds of things. And so I felt like, well, this is a great place to sort of to learn myself and interview people in different areas of that space that could help inform all of us business owners on, what's working, what's not working, and just really how to be better. And back to one of the points I made earlier, is to continue to grow, kind of like the reason you're probably doing your podcast, right? To grow and get smarter and more intelligent and meet new people. And someone told me a long time ago, and actually encouraged me to do it. And their line was, exposure brings opportunity, right? We're exposing ourselves to new things, right? I mean, why did you start yours? You've got a successful podcast.
Thank you. Yeah. So as we start to wrap up, the reason why I started this, because several reasons. I started this during the pandemic in 2020. So the country was locked. I was in the Bahamas at the time with my family. The country was locked down. And I also was reading a book by MIT Press called Find Your Path. And I was like, wow. And the book was discussing like key people in science who won like the Hertz Fellowship, which is like a big fellowship in science, NSF Fellowship. Well, these like huge fellowships. And they're like, presidents of this company and this type of thing. And I was like, wow. I was like, imagine if I could become a student of these types of people and not just make the classroom for myself, but expand the classroom so that it becomes a public forum.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that I'm helping people as I help myself, you know?
Yeah.
It's a mutual beneficial opportunity, benefiting from the people and learning about them, their trajectories, their life stories, how they make decisions, how they strategize, like, and then take the information and make it publicly available. Because I'm all about equity and access with strategy, not just saying I want to make things equal or make opportunities, create opportunities to help people, but be strategic with it, you know? And that's where this podcast came about. Like, for example, I'm gonna say this last thing and then we'll conclude. For example, people talk about getting into different academic institutions, right? But one strategy that people are not always aware of or not always trying to execute in their own career is many times those people do a research internship or some type of practical experience at the other university, get a letter of rec at that university for admission into a higher level program at the university they did the internship at. So like do research, for example, do research at University X, even though you go to University B, then you apply to University X to get into that university, and you have the letter of rec to support your application because of the experiences you've done. So that in itself is a strategy to progress in academia for different programs like grad school, med school, pharmacy school, all those others. So yeah, I completely agree. You know, Mr. Neil, I appreciate you sharing all these insights, you know, talking about financial management, wealth building, like real estate. So any final words before we conclude?
I would just say that this has been a lot of fun, David. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show. And, you know, if you're speaking to, I'm sure the brightest of them out there, people that are pursuing higher level degrees that are disciplined in science and in medicine. It's a tough place to be, super rewarding. And I would say, again, I would just underscore, don't stop your learning when you walk across and get you get that final degree and you start working. Now's the time to start embracing new areas maybe that you haven't had time to pursue before, because you already have the wherewithal and the intelligence to really understand these things. And by doing it and aligning with the right people, there's no telling how far you can go in your future in your life.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Thanks again, Mr. Neil, for joining me. I really appreciate it. Okay, welcome to the New Student Pharmacist Podcast Experience. It is so good to have you listening in today. My guest today is Mr. Jalen Harrison. Wow, this is an interesting experience because I met Jalen recently. We attend the same university, Howard University, and we also attend the same church, Grace Covenant Church at Capitol Hill. So just a quick introduction about Jalen. Jalen has served as a Future Leaders Fellow with the African American Mayors Association. He has served as an intern for Congresswoman Sheila Sher-Phyllis McCormick. He has served as a political intern for the Emerson Collective, and he also served as a legislative intern for Congresswoman Jennifer McKellen. So he's done a good bit. And you know, Jalen is also headed off to law school soon. So it's definitely a treat, I would say, to have Jalen on the podcast today. Jalen, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, David. I want to just thank you for having me. It's exciting.
Yeah, this is exciting. So what inspired you to pursue a career in law, particularly in choosing UVA Law School for your graduate studies after completing your time, or since you have completed your time at Howard?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, law was always something that I kind of wanted to pursue. I think when you're young and you're argumentative, people, try to point you in that direction. But the reality is I came to Howard with goals of doing political work and really uplifting the Black community. There were some systemic issues that I saw that I was hoping to address, and I'm still hoping to address, and I thought Howard was the best place to do that. And at my time at Howard, both in the classroom as well as during the internships I was doing, I just saw the way that many of the issues that I wanted or hoping to solve were rooted in legal structures and legal barriers. And again, in those internships, whether it was at, the congressional internships I did, or at Emerson Collective, which was a philanthropic organization, the people who I most kind of bonded with, the ones who was doing the work that I found the most interesting, both intellectually in terms of the actual material that they were studying and doing, as well as some of the practical implications of the work they were doing, was the lawyers. And that really solidified for me that law school was the right path for me, and that it was the right path for me to go straight through, immediately going from undergrad to UVA law. In terms of choosing what law school, you know, I cast a wide net. I applied to a total of 12 law schools. Many of them were, you know, recognized as some of the best law schools in the country. I kind of had a, you know, short, not a short list per se, but, you know, I kind of knew what type of law I wanted to do. I knew the type of law school I would need to go to do that. And, you know, after getting the acceptances, you kind of had to take into account a few things. The first is what network, what school has lawyers in some of the prominent, like, civil rights organizations that are in the country. You know, your NAACP Legal Defense Funds, your Southern Poverty Law Centers. Next, I had to think about, like, what would the cost be, right? And after I took that into account, and the last thing being culture, when I went to go visit some of these schools, where did I feel most at home? UVA really, I don't know, it just really appealed to me. Maybe it's because I'm from Virginia and that's home to me. But UVA it's an exceptional law school, and I'm excited to study there this fall.
Okay, dude, that's good, man. I'm happy for you. Very congratulations. You are doing well. So I want to dig deep into that. So what creates, or what allowed you to know that was home for you? I know you said it's another home for you, but what aspect of the culture? Because what you're pointing to, from my understanding, is also pointing to this concept of belonging, you know? So
absolutely.
And so culture and belonging and how they overlap. So what aspects of the culture were you looking for as you were trying to find a university that you think would be a good fit for you, or where you would belong, or where the culture felt at home?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll say it starts early in the admissions process, right? Where, like, I got a good feel for the culture of the schools that I applied to and that I potentially would attend, based off, you know, what was the interview like? That was kind of the first step. And when I interviewed with UVA, with their director of admissions, a woman named Roseanne Ibanez, I believe I'm pronouncing her last name right, it was just a really great and kind environment. I had met Roseanne about a year prior at this minority pre-law conference that was held on William & Mary Law's campus. And immediately as I joined the interview, she remembers me. You know, when she's talking about how she's happy to see me again, and it's just, you know, displaying a level of kindness. I always say there's moments when interviews change into conversations, right? Where it's no longer a situation where it's this, you know, power dynamic of somebody just feeding me questions, but we're just communicating with each other. So that kind of really set the tone. But at the end of the day, you know, you have to go, in my personal opinion, what I would suggest to other people who decide to pursue any advanced degree, you want to then go to the campus and really see how are the students living. So I go to UVA Law for a tour. I actually missed Admitted Students Day. I was working at the time. And I told Roseanne that I'd be there. And she set up a lunch with me and the Black Law Student Association, also known as the BOSA. So after I finished the tour, I'm with the BOSA. We're at this hotel right next to the law school. And everybody who was at that table was just incredibly honest about their experiences at UVA. The things that they loved about the school, as well as some of the things that they thought it could potentially be doing better. It was overwhelmingly positive. But then even after I, you know, got through my specific UVA law questions, I mean, at the end of the day, they just cared about me as a human. Everybody who's been in this position, the reality is that, like, we all, for the most part, have multiple schools that we could select. And, you know, you of all people know this. I mean, you did advanced degrees. At a certain point, it's you know, the quality of the education, regardless of where you choose, is going to be quite similar. So at the end of the day, it's where you're going to be the right fit. And, you know, they understood some of the other schools I was debating with. Many of them had also debated between attending those schools. And the vibe I got from all of them was, you know, we would love for you to be here. We like you. We think you'll succeed here. But hey, any of these schools that you're going to go to, you're going to succeed, and we'll be happy for you, and let's stay in touch regardless. Right? So it didn't feel like they were selling me. It just felt more like if this feels like home to you, come. And at the end of the day, I think that level of community that was at UVA Law, especially with the BOLSA, which is what I'm hoping to be tapped into, was really the not selling point, but really the I guess
point that convinced you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you completely. You know, because even for myself, I got accepted basically to every school that I applied to or that I interviewed at for pharmacy school. And, you know, for me at Howard, you know, it's interesting dynamic because it was not just about rankings. It was not just about what all I can gain, but I also thought about what can I give to the environment, you know? How do I see myself being able to grow in the environment? What areas, or just to use a little bit of technical terms, what value proposition that the school has aligns with the values that I have for myself? Which value propositions for that school aligns with my personal value, professional value propositions? So how do I see myself being able to bring value or gain value? So vice versa. Yeah, dude, that's good. And also the thing of belonging, dude, that's very powerful, because, you know, I've heard someone say, and this is actually a person of faith, she said, you know, the moment you realize that you belong somewhere, you are able to come up with strategies and work through even the challenges, because you know at the end of the day that you belong where you are. I mean, it's so powerful. So, how do you plan to balance the demanding workload of law school with other aspects of your life to ensure a holistic perspective on your career and personal well-being? What do you plan to do? How are you thinking about it now? Because you're about to embark. Yeah. I'll ask you. Pharmacy school. It takes some time. You have some coming to Jesus moments every now and again, but that's all right. That's a part of the process. So, what would you say is your plan or strategy for self-care? Let me make this practical. So, what do you say is your plan for self-care? What would you say is your plans for like academic achievement? And like, you know, certain people go into these programs trying to get 4.0, some people don't. Some people just want to do what they do, enjoy the program and get okay enough grades so that they're able to progress to the program. So what do you see a mix looking like?
Yeah, you know, I talked to many friends who have finished law school about this exact thing. I mean, you know, law school is one of the more rigorous advanced degrees. It's 3 years. And it's pretty much suggested that you need to treat it like a job. It shouldn't, getting, you know, a side job during law school is quite difficult. And some schools don't even allow you to do so, right? So it's very much a time where I'm gonna have to be committed. You know, to answer your question, the short answer is I actually don't know fully, but this is what, when I don't know something, I tend to, again, I go to my mentors, I go to advisors, and I just ask, hey, what did you do? And the overwhelming advice I got was, and what I've seen is, hey, like, again, this is going to be a daunting task, but like, treat it like a job. You know, a job, you work a job 9 to 5, 9 to 6, but once you get off that job, you need to take your breather. You need to make sure that you're still maintaining those same habits that you did in undergrad. You go to law school, that the habits that led to success there, you need to bring that with you in a law school. So I'm going to live a pretty disciplined life. I mean, I see myself, I'm somebody who loves just academia in general. I think scholarship is incredibly fascinating. So in terms of like the actual material of law, that's what most excites me. And you know, I'm not worried about delving into that at all. That's just, I love to learn. That's the kind of person I am. But yeah, I think one of the things I'm going to have to force myself to take breaks. I'm going to need to learn how to better formulate a work-life balance, because, you know, in undergrad, you had a lot more time in undergrad than I think people get credit for. I mean, most of my time was spent outside the classroom, you know, reading textbooks, reading material. But even outside of that, you know, you could still do a whole bunch of clubs. You read what I did earlier. I was able to do most of those internships I did. 2 of those were like during the semester. Like, it was, you know, I was able to balance that. That's not necessarily going to be possible with law school, or if it is possible, it's going to be incredibly difficult. So, I mean, it's short. That was a long answer, but the reality is I'm probably just going to call past lawyers who went through law school and say, hey, I'm dealing with this. What should I do? And get their advice. That's probably the best way. How do you balance everything?
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, but before I tell you how I balance everything, well, for me, before I get to me, you know, my brother's actually a lawyer. He was trained in the UK. So one of the things I've noticed with my brother, he has mastered the art of taking breaks. He knows how to take breaks. He knows how to take breaks. So, like, he played rugby while he was in law school. So
Wow.
he really pushed and really did that a lot. My brother Will Ferguson. He he continues to play rugby to this day. And he's been finished with law school probably from like 2017, 2018. So, I think finding a hobby, and that's something that for me, how do I maintain balance? Balance for me, it ebbs and it flows. I'm gonna be very honest with you. It ebbs and it flows. I have set priorities for myself. Like self-care is a priority. Like sleep is a priority. Nutrition is a priority. Community is a priority. Going to church for me is a part of my self-care. To be quite frank with you. So that's a priority for me. So my self-care is a priority. My scholarship is a priority. However, I know how far to push with that. This is degree 3 for me. So how I see this is a little different from degree 1 or degree 2, and I know what's required for me to progress to the next stage, and I'm learning what's going to be required for me to get into the other areas I want to get into, like either clubs or academic societies or internships. So I know how much to push, and I know when to stop. That's one thing I learned recently, probably in grad school. After you've done enough, you can stop, and that's okay. That's a very powerful concept that I learned. People who are very driven, you have to remind yourself that, and I have to remind myself of this too, that it's good to work, it's good, but it's also good to rest. Even Jesus rested, so too we, so we as well should rest as well. So yeah, man, that's how I do it. But I'll be honest with you, some days I'm not as balanced as I should be, but it is what it is. It is what it is.
Can I add something? Do you mind if I add something?
Go ahead, do it. This is guest today.
Yeah, I had a professor who I think talked about the concept of work-life balance in a way that really impacted me and that I really related to. Typically we have this idea that work-life balance means you have these set hours where you work 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, whatever it is, and then outside of that you're not doing any work. You're attending to your family, you're attending to your kids, whatever you need to do, right? But the professor is like, and do you understand this is a political guy in DC? He's like, that for me, work-life balance, it's about moments where maybe a week I'm working a lot, but then that next week I might need to take some time off to attend to the things I need to attend to, or maybe a month I was grinding really hard. And I found that when I was preparing for the LSAT, and again, I think anybody who had to prepare for any admissions test understands that these tests take a lot of work. It's really time commitment. In that seasons of my life, I was waking up at 5 a.m. to study because that's what was necessary. I didn't have any other time. So maybe I was going to bed early to make sure I could do that. But the moment it was a weekend, or the moment where that wasn't necessary, I had to reel myself back in and be like, okay, we're gonna take this entire Sunday off, or whatever was necessary. And this is the interesting thing I found, and of course this is anecdotal, but when I was studying for the exam, there was a moment where, and this happened very early on during my study period, where I was like, okay, I need to study every day for 2 to 3 hours every day. That's what it takes, right? That was misguided. And the summer came around, and I had friends, and my friends were in the city, and I decided, okay, I actually need to take like some days off, a couple of weeks, where I could just spend time with friends and enjoy life. And I found that my scores on practice tests increased when I took that time to get that mental break. So just a little something to add about that work-life balance aspect we were talking about.
Agree with you. And I've discussed this concept with probably about 50 plus people on this podcast. Some people phrase it as work-life balance. Some people call it work-life integration. Some people call it work-life fit. It depends, and also it depends on the person too. Yes, there are some standards for balance. There are some like basic things like self-care. When your self-care is out of whack. But there's balance. It depends on the person. One person may have 6 kids, a demanding job, and a spouse. One person might be single. Balance for them looks different. Looks very different. And I think we have to be flexible with that. Our definition of that, even though we have some baseline parameters for that. So, can you highlight some of your most impactful achievements or contributions during your time at Howard? What made Howard stand out to you, or what makes it stand out to you as you transition on to UVA? What has been one of your most
Hmm.
compelling or enjoyable experiences at Howard? Um, I'm new here, but I have a number of experiences I could talk about. So, what has been really enjoyable for you?
Yeah, Howard is a to me it's such a special institution. Um,
Yeah.
you know, I won't lie. There are, of course, with any school, there are problems. I feel like
Yes, 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 yes.
Howard's problems get highlighted often.
Mm,
In my personal, I think it's a little bit too much it gets highlighted, and it kind of overshadows some of the brilliance and beauty of the campus. Um, but to answer your question, Howard is unique for a couple of reasons. First, of course, it's HBCU, historically black college/university. It's arguably the most prominent HBCU. I don't say that because I go there. I am a little biased, but I still think that to be true.
nothing
Uh,
wrong with that.
but because of that, and because it's kind of known as this place that has a large alumni base, who has really prominent African American leaders throughout history who have attended the institution, you
Hmm.
get a self-selection of students who are just really passionate about a variety of different topics and really smart, um, really willing to do the work in order to excel in their coursework.
Hmm.
And similarly, you get professors too,
Hmm.
many of them who specialize in, you know, uh, multiple disciplines, but also have like an Africana lens with respect to the discipline. I studied political science and I minored in philosophy. Um, and, some of the most intelligent Black people in the world are here, truly teaching.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so because of that, you get exposed to scholarship and disciplines that just are not available at other universities. An example I like to bring up is, I studied under one of my philosophy professors, a man named Dr. Patrick Gooden. And, he kind of was one of the earlier adoptees of like Africana philosophy. And you get to study that at Howard. You don't get to study that at other institutions.
Hmm.
Um, in terms of experiences, it's great. I think, here's what I said, the Howard, again, alumni base in the name really holds a lot of weight, that I found that if somebody went to Howard, they really will, go out of the way to be able to help you. And
Hmm. I
during
agree
my
with you.
time, during my time here, I was part of I'm part of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, also known as the NAACP. I was on the political action committee. I joined my sophomore year as a member. My junior year, I became the engagement coordinator for that committee. And then my senior year with them right now, I co-chair the committee with a dear friend named Saida Webb. And really in my junior year, my entire goal was to be able to leverage some of the relationships and connections I developed during my previous internships and kind of bring that over to Howard University and expose our student base to those people so that they can understand what it looks like to be, to have a career in politics, right? And when
Hmm.
I was a fellow with the African American Mayors Association, um, I was fortunate to speak to a whole bunch of mayors, some of the more notable, such as Mayor Eric Adams in New York City, as well as some lesser known mayors. But by far, the mayor who I think had the most impact on me as well as the other fellows is a woman named Sean Patterson Howard, who represents Mount Vernon, New York. He also happens to be a Howard alumni, right? So after my fellowship ended, I really wanted to have an elected official, speak to the members of our committee. So I just, cold emailed Mayor Patterson Howard, and he responded really quickly to me. He was like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
like, I would love to speak," and we were able to set up a Zoom call, and it was just a time where he was able to feed into the
Hmm.
students at Howard, and just give them advice and wisdom and insight about one, what does it mean to be a public servant? What does it
Hmm.
mean to give back to your community? Um,
Hmm.
and you know, it wasn't the most impactful event. There might have been 10 or 12 people on the call, right? This wasn't a scenario where there was 100 or 200. But
Hmm.
despite the fact that there was only 10 or 12 people on that call, I know that they got something out of that call.
Yeah.
That the information that Mayor Sean Patterson Howard gave to us was useful and will be useful to them. right? So that
Mm-hmm.
right, like that is one of my favorite Howard stories, and one that I shared with you just to show just how not necessarily easily accessible. Actually, yeah, easy accessible and helpful our alumni base is. Um, and really the fact that you can reach out to anyone. And that's one story. I have many more, as I'm sure you do, of just how the university has championed students, but also how the alumni base has been made sure to continue to give back. Um, and that's why I love Howard. That's why I want my brother to come here. I'm trying to he's young, he's 14. I'm trying to get him to come here. But I'm always
Mm-hmm.
happy when I see another person attending Howard University.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. So, you made the point sometimes the negative gets highlighted more than the positive. Yeah, you have to keep the right perspective. I think gratitude and, having a data-driven outlook allows
Mm,
you to see the positive for what it is, and see the issues for what they are too. But, even with issues, you can complement it, changing the narrative and complement to solving them. And then you said some other things I want to point out. Can you explain what's the Africana lens?
oh, so
How
this
about
is
drink?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I maybe shouldn't have just thrown out a word without describing what I meant by it. When I'm talking about Africana philosophy, excuse me, when I'm talking about Africa, let me start over. When people say Africana, just in general, often they're talking about, like all Black people throughout the diaspora, right?
Oh,
So
okay.
it's not solely attached to the continent of Africa, it's just wherever you go. Um, there's a lot of work with respect to Africana philosophy. Somebody who's incredibly prominent in that field is Dr. Lewis Gordon, who has an entire textbook dedicated to the work. But before getting too theoretical, it's kind of this idea that um,
Just bro.
there
This is
is
just
a
bro.
there yeah there's a connection to a certain degree amongst Black people as a response to just the experiences of oppression that many people go through post
Okay.
like the colonization of Africa, like that inciting event lead to
Mhm.
some level of connectivity. This is not to say that all Black people are the same or that Black people are modern. I'm very clear in what I'm saying. And I would advise people to go read up on African philosophy if possible. But
Read.
so when I say that, like Howard has an Africana lens, um, a great example I like to bring up is in the political science department, there is a political theory and there's a Black political theory. These are two separate classes. And I
Mhm.
took political theory and I wouldn't be able to tell you the difference between the political theory and the Black political theory because so much of the text that we're reading is Black scholars speaking from a Black perspective.
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot. Dude, this is the thing, and I'm just gonna say, Black people have contributed in so many unique ways to the advancement of science, mathematics, and other fields. And we hear about even music. You hear about it later on, like hundreds of years later. Oh, this is actually done by a person of color. This is actually done
Mhm.
by a Black person. Katherine Johnson, the mathematician, woman mathematician, she did those calculations for the flight trajectory by hand. By
It's
hand.
amazing.
Can you imagine that? David Blackwell, the Black mathematician, all of these big, huge players. And unfortunately, because of bias, we hear about their stories later on and they don't get the recognition, or they get recognition at a delayed interval from a delayed standpoint. But it is what it is. We just have to work the situation and work the system as best possible. But yeah, the last thing I'll say before we continue in this conversation, you talk about your mentors. It's so good to have good mentors, dude. Having
Mhm.
people who can like speak directly into your situation and also who respond quickly to emails. Because sometimes, like my mentors, like three big players outside of my parents, um, three big mentors I have, three mentors I have are Dr. Langer, Dr. Bayer, and Dean May. I mean Chancellor May. You know, they're some of the most phenomenal, down to earth, hardworking people I've met outside of my family. So yeah, dude, as how do you plan to foster as we start to wrap
David,
up? How do you
do you mind if I add one more thing? Actually, I want to mention
go ahead,
something
dude,
to
go
what you
ahead.
were saying
You're the star,
because
man. Star.
yeah, you brought up mentors and you brought up just people who've helped you along the way. And I think this is important to the question you asked previously about the Howard experience and you know what I've thought about this. Somebody who I am incredibly grateful for outside of like my family, but on the university is a man named Dr. Brandon Hogan, who he's in the philosophy department. He went to Howard University for undergrad. He went to Harvard Law. And he also went to University of Pitt for his PhD in philosophy. And he's my favorite professor. I'll say that publicly. But he's the reason why. One, I've learned so much from him just studying under him. The way he teaches philosophy is very analytical. Having to explicitly craft arguments and make sure that they're both valid and sound was very beneficial for me. Not just in terms of writing and reading, etc., but also like for the law school admissions tests. Alone, like that was a beneficial skill. Without that class, I don't know how well I would have done an exam. But more so, when I was, preparing my written materials for law school, he was the guy who I would go to have him read through it. And I remember I sent him a personal statement, and the first time he reads it, he's like, in like corporate speak, but I'm going to paraphrase. This ain't it. Like it's okay. But it's not what it is. Yeah. It's not what it needs to be. Okay. I sent another draft. This is better, but it's still not there. Wow. I sent another draft. Let's have a meeting. Go to my office after class. I said, okay. I go to his office, and we spend time just sketching out, like, getting to the heart of why do I want to go to law school? What do I want the admissions team to know about me, and how do I make that a compelling narrative, right? So I do that. I send it to him again, and then he continues to get notes, and eventually it reached the point where it was good, where it's something I would be proud to be able to submit to these schools, right? And I owe a lot of, I think, my success with respect to getting into law schools on the fact that like he just took the time to read my materials and feed into. And it's not just him. I could mention like Professor Jay Stewart, who's also at the university, who's been super helpful. A whole bunch of professors who just take the time when they don't need to do that. That's not part of their job. Their job is to teach you, and you can go to office hours if you need to. They don't need to spend extra time going through your law school materials, but they do. And I think that's something that's really special about Howard.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I can think of some professors I'm starting to interface with, considering this is my first year. But even before I get to them, like some professors I could name a few, like Dr. Aldifi, Dr. Turner. One of my favorite, I won't state who is my exact favorite, but one of my favorite professors for pharmacy is Dr. Deshna, Simon Deshna. He's my favorite professor. My favorite expression I use is, let's be clear in your mind. Be clear in your mind. So as you're doing the calculation, be clear in your mind. I'm like, yeah, I need to be clear. So I thoroughly enjoy his class. But yeah, it's a similar story. My dad was the one who actually helped me with my pharmacy essay. My dad's a physician, Wolf Ferguson. My dad, he did the same thing to me when I gave him the essay. He was like, David, this ain't ready. Like that's what we speak back on. David, this ain't ready. He said, I would not let you into my pharmacy school with this essay. You need to rewrite this. And he told me that straight up, and I'm glad he did. Because that allowed me, to do a quick check, check how I was writing, check my perspectives, really go back to the drawing board and really put in the time to write a good essay. And that I know for a fact that complemented to me being able to make the strides I was able to make in the admissions. Of course, by God's grace, but the work, you have to put in the work. So my dad helped me tremendously, and also my mom, dude, to this day, I still send scholarship essays to my family members.
Wow.
I still do it, because it's one thing to read an essay and to think you have it together. It's another thing to share your work with someone else and they pull your feet back down to earth and say, you need to fix this, And even, dude, my thesis, I could talk about my thesis. Trust me, I'll be brief. But my thesis, dude, my thesis advisor was so particular, down to the spaces after the periods. Wow. Down to the spaces between the oxygen and the negative sign, down to the formatting of the tables, down to the italics, and everything should be uniform in its italics, down to the references, it should be alphabetized, down to the structures, and make sure the biosynthetic pathways are accurate. And if you can't show them an accuracy, shorten them and show what you can in an accurate way. So, but yeah, dude, as we conclude, what advice do you have for those wanting to pursue law school or wanting to come to Howard? What advice does Jalen, my recently found buddy from Howard and from Grace Covenant, what advice does he have for them?
Yeah, with educate, I have a deep love for education, and I think everybody should always be learning. You should be reading books. You should be listening to podcasts. Just any way you can pursue wisdom is important. With respect to law school, I think one of the things that really benefited me at Howard was, a flip kind of switched for me early on, where you first get to university and the goal is I just want to get A's. I just want to get A's, do well, and my goal kind of changed as I pursued my studies further. Really, what I wanted to do is I wanted to learn as much as I can, and I wanted to submit work that not only I was proud of, but also that my professors could respect. And when you do that, you will also get A's, but you'll get a lot more too, And I think for the student who wants to, it's in Howard. If you do want to come here, this is a great place to be. I highly recommend it. But when you get here, you need to work. When you get here, you need to feed back into the school itself, and you need to, do what you can in order to, further your goals, whatever that end goal would be. For someone who wants to do law school, to give you practical advice, I mean, two incredibly important aspects of law school is your GPA and your LSAT score. They're not everything. I want to be very clear, they're not everything, but they're just two big parts. You're also going to make sure you, have some experience, maybe do some internships, do some flows, figure out why you want to go to law school and how you can be a good fit for that school. But with respect to the GPA, again, you want to put your best foot forward during your studies and make sure you're getting a high GPA, because the schools, we're seeing great inflation happen. And if you look at, for example, GPA medians at law schools, even 10 years ago, they're very different than what they are now. They're much higher now than they were 10 years ago, right? And with the LSAT, I think the LSAT, it's a difficult exam. It's an exam that I actually really do appreciate, because it takes a long time, or at least for me, to have gotten good at it, or to improve. And you could look at it two ways. You can look at it as, oh man, I have to take this hard exam. That's unfortunate. Maybe I don't want to put in the work. Or you can look at it as an opportunity for you to kind of separate yourself from other people who are also trying to get into the same schools that you're trying to get in. So I think the LSAT is one of the best investments you can make. If you have the ability to pay for a course or get a subscription to like a LSAT platform. I used a platform called LSAT Demon. I highly recommend you do that, because even 2 or 3 or 4 point improvement is going to, jump you in front of thousands of applicants. And if it's the case that you do not have the finances to do so, there's a couple options. Khan Academy has a free LSAT resource that I would recommend if you can't do anything. But also, a lot of these platforms offer fee waivers for people who are under certain, economic thresholds. And I would just do your research and look into that. But yeah, my main advice is basically take your studies seriously, and always pursue knowledge. And I think you really can't go wrong if you do those two things.
Yeah, man, this is good. This is good. So, Jalen, thanks again for joining me today. It was so good to have you on.
Thank you.
Okay, Isaiah Swan. It is so good to have you as a guest today. So Isaiah Swan is
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Isaiah Swan is a student in the Medical Sciences Training Program and Cell and Developmental Biology Graduate Program at the University of Virginia. Originally from Marietta, Georgia, Isaiah completed a degree in neuroscience at the University of Texas at Dallas and a postgrad year at the Warren Center for Neuroscience Drug Discovery at Vanderbilt before arriving at UVA in 2021. Broadly, he is interested in neurology and expanding our understanding of basic cellular processes in neurons, such as how elements of the neuronal cytoskeleton contribute to axon pathfinding and proper synapse formation. While passionate about researching medicine, he believes it's important to lead a fulfilled life outside of work. Swan enjoys spending his free time sampling local restaurants with friends, making music, watching reality TV shows, and exercising. So wow, I have Isaiah Swan, MD-PhD student and one of the student representatives on the NCAA Board of Governors. This is definitely an honor and a treat. So as we get started, what have been your long-standing interest in the field of science?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of as long as I can remember, I've been very interested in knowing how things work. And I think for me, that ended up really kind of manifesting in middle school when I started going off to summer camps. And it was a science-specific summer camp. And I really wanted to know, like, what is neuroscience? How is science done in the brain, in the spinal cord, in the nerves around the body? How does that work? And from a very young age, I was very interested in these questions, and that's kind of followed me obviously to this point. And so I would say my long-standing interests are, for the most part, really in neuroscience, and how do neurons actually function? How do they find their correct synaptic partners? Like, how do they make their connections? How are they injured in different disease states? So for me, I grew up kind of with a number of neurological diseases in my proximity, with different family members having those things. And I wanted to know kind of how that works. And, as I got older and studied in these classes, I really started to realize that for the most part, we don't really have a super great handle on the origin of a lot of these diseases. And so that's kind of my interest just broadly, is understanding, how these disease processes work. And then eventually, I'd like to kind of
the treatment,
contribute to treatments.
Yeah, that's good. So the word they use, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because you're the MD-PhD student, I'm the PharmD student. So the word they use is, in terms of the origin, is etiology, correct? And then in terms of unknown etiology, is idiopathic. So yeah, I did my master's thesis on cardiolipin and its role in neurodegenerative diseases. So I'll be happy to discuss that as we progress throughout this. So how do you maintain view of the bigger picture in your career and in your life in general? How do you keep perspective when you encounter challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. And that can be very difficult. And it was something that was really difficult for me, especially as I, entered the final stages of undergrad, and then also during my first year of medical school. It was really difficult for me to kind of see that big picture, because I was so bogged down with classes and learning various processes, like where do T cells come from, like that sort of thing, right?
Yeah, immunology is very, 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 very vast. Yeah.
Right. And so for me, it was so difficult, to look up and look around me. I'm blessed to have a really great family that, even when I was having a very difficult time, just kind of reaching out to them, and just taking time away from my studies to call them, they would be reaching out to me. And I think that, that's one critical way that I really kind of helped, maintain that bigger view, because they're my why, right? Like they're why I do what I do, why fundamentally I'm interested in these diseases. And so for me, reaching out to family, talking to them especially whenever I'm going through something difficult, that's sort of how I kind of maintain that kind of bigger picture, view.
So relationships, I completely agree with that, because I think I would even venture to say that reaching out to family members and friends and close relatives is a part of self-care. And I think self-care is very important, because no one else is going to care for you per se. You have to care for you as best as you know how. So how have you been adaptive and creative in the field of science? You talk about your passion for neurology. So what particular diseases strike your interest? Are you along the path of neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Boston, ALS, all those others, or MS, or are you along the path?
And what I mean by that is there are a lot of basic cellular processes that go awry due to factors that, for the most part, we don't really understand very well. And I'm interested in understanding those factors in all these different diseases, whether that be Parkinson's disease, Huntington disease, which has a genetic component, right? Multiple sclerosis, right? All of these things. And so I think, generally I'm very interested in all of these kind of neurodegenerative diseses, but I'm also very interested in concussion. So I think you mentioned that I have a role on the NCAA Board of Governors, which is one of the, if not the highest governing body in the association. And I've been trying to figure out ways, to kind of synergize my love for sport with, my passion for research. And I've been thinking a lot about, how to do that on the medical side and on the research side. And one thing that is huge in sports right now, especially, is concussion and traumatic brain injury. And it turns out that intersects very nicely with what I study, which are intermediate filaments in neurons, and sort of how those processes might be affected and contribute to pathologies following a traumatic brain injury, or could contribute to recovery following traumatic brain injury. So that's sort of my kind of broad interest in the field of neuroscience and neurology. And I also think that kind of helps me to stay really adaptive and also creative, is really just looking at the different areas of my life and seeing where I can find common ground to help kind of synergize in those areas and help kind of push the field forward wherever I can.
Wow, this is all. I feel like I'm being inspired as I talk to you. This is good. So, what have been your most effective and impactful ideas to date? What ideas did you say you contributed to, or you have helped to create or start? What would you say? Is one idea or some ideas that you think have been effective and impactful, or that you've been told about, even when it comes to your learning in medical school?
Yeah, I think one thing, and I don't know that this might be kind of a tangential answer to the question, because I wouldn't necessarily say that I've had a really hugely impactful idea yet in science, but one thing that I always like hearing from my classmates in med school and in different research classes is that I ask kind of good questions, or questions that make people think about stuff. And I do appreciate that. I appreciate hearing that, because I think it's important that that we all think about sort of the why underlying a lot of the information that we learn, if that makes sense. Kind of questioning all of the things that we hear about and that we learn in a classroom on a slide. I think it's just important to kind of sit back and ask those questions. And so that's kind of, I would say that that's one way that I've been kind of impactful, or have had kind of impactful ideas, just by asking questions. But obviously I'm very early on in my career.
So am I.
And so I wouldn't necessarily say that I've had a crazy impactful idea, although I'm chasing down kind of some leads right now as far as my research goes that could be impactful if it works out. But obviously it's way too early to know. So
yeah, and I was encouraging. I don't know what the project is on. So what's your project on?
Yeah. So currently I study intermediate filaments in neurons, and intermediate filaments are named that way because they fall in size between actin or microfilaments and microtubules, which are kind of the larger filaments that everybody really seems to care about. And the interesting property that sets intermediate filaments apart from actin and microtubules is that they have a plethora of genes dedicated to their formation, and owing to these various genes, there are multiple isoforms that really each cell will express, multiple isoforms, multiple different versions of these proteins that different cells will express. And we don't exactly know why, but we do know that they do something. And so that's kind of where my project falls. And it's figuring out of the intermediate filament proteins that are expressed in neurons, which ones are present when during development of the neuron, and also what are they doing? And obviously that's a huge question, but that's what I'm trying to answer through my work currently.
That's very interesting, dude. The power of differentiation, Power of cell differentiation.
Yeah.
How different cells have different responsibilities, so the proteins function in different ways, even if they may come from the same gene, or they may be powerhouses. So, how do you find the right environment for you to thrive scientifically and intellectually? You are a very outgoing young person, and I thought it was very commendable to see the progress that you're making. So how do you find the right environment for yourself? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So I think, to kind of rewind, my very first experience in research was in the Weinschenker lab at Emory University in 2015.
2015, okay.
2015 at Emory, and I was a high school student doing summer research, and it was amazing. But I had a really great mentor. And I think that made all the difference for me, you know, like he really fostered a very, just a great environment that was very supportive, allowed me to fail, but you know, fail forward, take lessons from the failures that I made. And so kind of, you know, starting with that experience, moving forward, the various different labs that I joined, I tried to look for, you know, where were there solid mentors who would allow me to, as you said, fail forward, and ultimately, you know, be successful in studying what I want to study and learning how to do good science, because that's the stage that I'm at right now, right? Is learning how to do good science. And so for me, you know, I was a little fortunate because owing to some of my kind of undergrad, basically owing to my schedule, I had to, you know, do summer kind of internships away from my university, and have sort of shorter research experiences. And because of that, I got to experience so many different lab cultures. And so, you know, from each of those experiences, I just grabbed the little parts that I liked, and I carried that with me and looked for a lab that had something like that. And I've been very blessed to end up in a lab, the Winkler Lab here at the University of Virginia, that is just incredibly supportive, has fantastic people, and, you know, ultimately allows me to thrive in many different ways.
Yeah, I must really listen because I feel like I'm being motivated to continue with what I'm doing. So yeah, this is good. So how do you maintain a balanced life given all your responsibilities and accomplishments? A better way to put this would be, how do you maintain work-life integration? You have a lot of responsibilities on your plate. I think it's commendable that you're doing them well, but how do you maintain work-life integration?
Yeah, I think that's a tough one. You know, I feel like I have ebbs and flows where I feel very, very balanced, and then there are other times where I feel like I have no balance at all, and I have like no control over my schedule, and it can be tough. I think, you know, I think it's very much, I think a huge kind of piece when things are working for me is that I feel like I have control over my time, as far as when I am doing something, I don't allow myself to get interrupted by my various other responsibilities, right? I'm putting all of my attention into that one thing until it's done. And then I'm shifting my priority to something else. And I'm doing that task, and then I'm done. And then, you know, of course, you know, the biggest thing is really just making sure that you're giving yourself enough rest, right? I think that that's key for balance, whether that's sleep or just generally taking breaks and time off to do things that kind of energize you and feed you. So I think, you know, when things are working for me, those are kind of the keys. But, you know, I think I'd be lying to you if I said that I feel like I have a super balanced life.
Okay, Isaiah. So what has been some of the most beneficial advice you have received?
Yeah, you know, I think kind of going back to something I alluded to earlier, you know, I always wondered, you know, how people were so good at multitasking, because I would always struggle with that. And, you know, one thing that one of my mentors told me was that, you know, people who are good at multitasking aren't necessarily multitasking, right? They've just gotten very good at shifting priorities. And that was huge for me, because you know, that's why I stopped trying to do everything at the same time, and why I decided, you know, I really need to be mentally present for this one task, and then I'll take a break, then I'll be mentally present for this next task, and so on and so forth. And I think that that's a huge piece of advice that that I found very beneficial. And then another piece of advice I got was actually, back when I was an undergrad, I was at an NCAA meeting, I was at a conference, and I was talking with someone. I don't remember exactly what his role was, but I think he might have been an athletic director. I don't remember exactly, but I remember talking to him, and he was doing all these different things around the association, had all these different roles, and I was so impressed. And I just remember, I remember telling him kind of the situation I was in, where I wanted to do, more with the association, but I was kind of unsure of whether that was allowed, or I was not really sure of, as far as my class schedule, like just forward. Whenever I felt kind of anxiety about an opportunity that was coming up, I would just say yes, and I would do it. And obviously you need to take care of your mental and your physical health, and if this is going to interfere with those things, then don't do them. But if you're ever worried about whether you can handle a task, I think you should just jump in, and you shouldn't be afraid to kind of take that step, because the odds are very, very high that you'll be successful in whatever you do, or at least you'll learn something from that experience. That was kind of a huge thing for me, just saying yes to things, to more things, accepting more responsibility as they come up. I think that's huge.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Isaiah, because this is the thing. Of course, like you said, you want to put caveats on this, in that you make sure you manage yourself, your wellness, your mental health, your academic potential and progress. You want to make sure you manage all those factors. But it's very important for you to not get caught up in the paralysis of analysis, or get caught up in your fear of the what if, to the point where you don't act and take on responsibilities and opportunities that could really serve your benefit. So case in point, even the podcast, starting a podcast, there's so many questions that roam in your mind. Do I want to do this? Do I have the time to do this? Will I be able to get guests? There are lots of doubts and questions and things that you are concerned or curious about that roam in your mind. But at one point you have to step out, do it, and it becomes an act of faith and an act of hope, in that you are pursuing this so that you're able to help people. But this is very important. It's very important for you to act and not just get caught in the what if, or the potential, things that could happen. So, as we conclude, what advice would you give to someone who looks at Isaiah and says, or they are almost lost for words of what you're doing? MD-PhD plus, the part, the NCAA board of governors, and student recognition. What would you say to someone who looks at your path and trajectory so far and says, I want to be like you, I want to do what you're doing?
But it is very rewarding, and I definitely think it's worth it for me. Just the way that I look at these degrees is I see an MD as allowing me to use the current tools available, like the best possible tools available right now, to treat and to heal people. And I view a PhD as being involved in the creation of knowledge and the development of tools for the future that can be used to treat disease and to help people. And I would say that anybody that is interested in both of those phases, look into an MD PhD, and consider pursuing it. I think it's worth it. I think for the people who already know that they want to enter the field, I think demonstrating and this is free game for application season, but demonstrating a commitment to research is huge. Demonstrating a passion for answering questions that people might not have even thought of yet, or questions that seem super kind of far reaching. I think that's kind of a critical thing. But I would say jump in with confidence. After all, it's such a it's a path that can grind you down. If you don't, I would advise that you develop that system and feed and nurture that system. But having those support systems are really going to help you to thrive when you're dealing with the adversities of medical school and of kind of grad school. I think that's generally the advice that I would give. And I'll also just say good luck.
Okay, yeah, dude. But anyway, Isaiah, thank you so much for joining me today. It is so good, and it was so good to have you on as a guest.
Purpose of these episodes not at all for advice or medical suggestions. These are aimed to provide support to peer pharmacists in training in educational and intellectually stimulating ways. Again, these are not at all for medical advice or medical suggestions. Please see your local board and state-certified health professional. The views of this podcast represent those of my guests and I.
Thanks for listening to the podcast series The New Student Pharmacist, where we discuss chemistry and pharmacy, as well as leaders in pharmacy careers, community, and chemistry and pharmacy research. We encourage you to support the work we are doing and follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts by subscribing for free. We are so glad that you were able to tune in today. Note, the views on the podcast represent those of my guest, and I take care and all the best.
Hi, Keshav. It's so good to have you on. Thanks again for joining me. So, let's get started. What have been your long-standing interest in the field of science?
Yeah, so I've been interested in science for such a long time, since childhood, really. And there's a lot of different things that brought me to it. And I think the first and most important one was just the constant kind of learning and evolving that science occurs through. And if you're someone that practices science or is part of the scientific field, you go through the same kind of development and evolution as well. You know, you are constantly learning things. Every field is constantly evolving. So you're never stagnant. You're always changing as times change, as things change, you know, everything changes. So you change with it. And I think the second thing that really drew me to science was that you're able to make a real tangible impact on people's lives. You know, with your understanding of science and your understanding of how things work, you can manipulate things and change some things so that you can, you know, potentially fix some problems or even be proactive about things to really make a significant impact upon people in the world that we live in. I think those two factors were huge reasons why I was drawn to science and can constantly pursue the scientific field.
Yeah, I completely agree with you because, you know, I think I've come to understand that the more you learn, the more you realize there's so much more to learn.
Absolutely.
As, you know, I think even now, especially during this pandemic time, we can see the significance of science and the use of science in terms of developing and eventually testing the vaccination for COVID-19, and also in our daily lives in which we go to doctors and sit down on the science teachers and on the science professors and perform research, in my case, as well as you as well. So, how do you maintain view of the bigger picture in your life and in your career in general? Given all of the difficulties which I'm sure you faced, all of the challenges and which a lot of people are facing due to this pandemic, how do you maintain view of the bigger picture?
Yeah, so just like you said, it is very, very, very difficult. And at times it's very easy to get kind of bogged down by the minutia, you know, and the everyday little challenges that we face. And, you know, especially with the pandemic, just things are magnified, you know, times 10 or even more. But
Mhm.
I'll kind of give you an example. So recently, with medical education, what we have are like graded clinical examples. Basically, we're told to like, okay, go take a history and physical on a patient. This patient will then grade you based on, you know, how well you performed the physical and things like that. So I just recently got my grade back for one of my encounters, and I was like looking through the checklist, and I was, you know, kind of getting frustrated about like where I lost some points. You know, I was like, I mean, it's such little things that you lose points on. But then at the end of the comment section, the patient wrote, I felt very well respected. I felt heard, and I felt that if you were my doctor, I would be well taken care of. And honestly, once I read that one statement, all of my anger, all of my frustration went out the window. I was like, okay, you know what? I can get better. You know, maybe the patient's criticisms was valid, and you know, the specific techniques, you know, we can always get better at that. But at the end of the day, why I'm doing what I'm doing is for the patient, and it's to make this patient feel like they have a partner in healthcare. So taking little things like that, realizing what's the bigger goal of it all, what are you really trying to achieve, and kind of validating that made me feel like, okay, this is all worth it. Like the challenges that I'm facing, you know, academically right now, personally, just it's all for something. It's all meant for something. So just hearing that validation made me realize, okay, it's all going to be worth it.
Yeah, you know, I can say a lot of things on that. It's important to be focused on specific things in terms of having a growth mindset, which is very important, as well as, you know, validation is important. And it plays a large role in a lot of people's growth in academia, as well as even in the lab. Having a professor say you did a good job is significant. Having a professor say you're on the right path does compliment. So I've read your bio, and we knew each other beforehand, before you went to medical school. So my question to you is, how have you been adaptive and creative in the field of science?
Yeah, so I mean, from where I'm at right now, I'm definitely in the, you know, I'm still a student, I'm still in the learning phase. Before I don't think I can make any like real significant contribution yet. But the ways that I've been creative and adaptable is mainly in that learning, is how I choose to understand and kind of process information. Because with science and with, you know, just medicine, the field that I'm in, there's so much. There's just so much information. I believe one of your other guests, Tommy, he said it's like drinking water from a fire hose, and that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. There's just so much. So, you know, I'm not the type of person that can sit down and read a textbook for like 8 to 10 hours a day. So I've had to be, you know, pretty creative with just the ways that I, you know, understand some things or even memorize some things. You know, there's lots of resources outside that kind of put, let's say, a specific medical condition, they'll put it in like a picture so that you're making associations with words and specific clinical symptoms and treatments, and they'll all pull it together. And like, that's how I've chosen to learn different diseases, so that when a question comes up or when a patient presents with a specific set of symptoms, I'm now making the association. So just from handling all that information, how I choose to apply it, I think has been the real way that I've been the most creative or adaptable, at least right now. Hopefully I make more significant impacts in the future, so that, you know, I can say that, you know, I did something new, or I did something new to help someone. But as of right now, that's where I'm at.
Okay, that's good. And also, actually, before I get to that, so you said that you've been adaptive and creative in your learning style, your approach to the content. So in what ways, give us some examples of some resources that you use for people who are listening.
Yeah, so I mean, there's tons of things out there, specifically for medical students. I'm sure that they've all heard of this, or if you're going into medical school, you'll definitely hear about these. But Sketchy is a big one. That's the picture thing that I was talking about. A good tool for kind of, because inevitably with medicine, you're just gonna have to end up memorizing some things, is Anki. Basically like kind of like a flash. I want to say that it's basically a flashcard device, but it has its own algorithm for spatial repetition and memory and things like that. So it's a good tool. Personally, what I've done is I've kind of brought it back to some of our engineering roots with the ways that we've kind of like understood things back in some of our intro BME classes, where we've had to just, they just kind of threw us a problem. We had to just go understand it and break it down in our own terms. So a lot of the body, if it comes to like blood flow or circulation, I'm breaking it down into like pressures and flows, and just understanding like resistances, like understanding it through that means. So if you're breaking it down that way, it kind of made more sense to me, just because it was going back to things that I've been dealing with for a couple of years now. So yeah, those are the couple of ways that I've been trying to learn everything.
That's good, dude. That's good. For me, I remember, you may not remember this, but I remember a while back, this is when we were still at Georgia Tech. I think it was me, you, and a few other people. And I started riddling off one of my raps for the amino acids.
Yes, I do remember. Yes.
Yeah. So for me, that's kind of how I learn things. I put it to a rhythm, I make a rhyme. Also, I use associations, draw pictures and stuff like that. But for me, my main modality is through rhymes and raps and lyrics.
And we all have our own unique ways to learn things. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And we have to make sure we're enjoying it. But I would just throw this out there to you. I've interviewed several other people, and one of the ways, and also graduate students and medical students, and one of the ways they have also been able to make an impact is also through mentorship. So maybe something you may want to consider. So I'm sure that a lot of people are trying to get into medical school, and you achieve that. So I think that's commendable. So my question to you on that note is, to this point in your studies, how have you been able to be successful? You were able to graduate, you were able to get into medical school, and so far you've been progressing. How have you been able to maintain the success that you need to progress from stages, from graduation to medical school?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the question itself is very focused on me, but when I think about why I'm where I am, is mainly because of the people around me. I have to give a ton of people a lot of credit for helping me out through the entire process, starting with my family, who's just been there for me through everything. My mother is a physician, so she's been a wonderful role model and a leader, basically guiding me, throughout the medical field. And whenever I have any challenges, she's just like, "Yep, I faced the exact same thing. Don't worry, kid, you're on the right path." But then also my friends, who are basically my second family. They've been there for me through everything, personally, academically, any problems that I've faced. They've been there for me. They're the reason that I feel like I've grown as a person throughout the years. They've challenged me. They've supported me. They've taught me things. I've taught them things. So both just the people around me has been a major reason why I'm at where I'm at. And I don't think there's anything really special about me. I think I'm just persistent. I'm stubborn. If I fail one time, I'm gonna get right back up and keep trying until someone else, until I just can't keep going anymore. So I think that's really the only thing. I'm not like the smartest person. I'm not the most talented, but I'm persistent. And I think maybe that's probably the only thing that's kept me going, really.
That's good. Yeah, for me too, it's the same. I'm not any genius or anything of that sort, but one of the things I do say, or one of the things I do is I work hard, and I believe in being persistent. It's interesting that you use the word stubborn, because one of the professors from MIT that I interviewed said the exact same thing about himself. He said, I'm just stubborn. Yeah, I stick with it and I go along, as he was discussing his work in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic and his contributions there. Also, continuing on, how have you thought or found the right environment for you to thrive scientifically and intellectually? In other words, why did you choose Georgia Tech, and why did you choose New York Medical College to study medicine?
Well, I guess from a general point of view, when it comes to the environment, just like I said before, it's surrounding yourself by the right people. Those people have caused me to grow both personally and academically. And then when it comes to both tech and YMCA, well, I chose tech mainly because it was first of all away from home. I had grown up in the Northeast for 18 years at that point, so I just wanted to kind of leave and go somewhere different. And tech was different. It's in the South, completely different in the Northeast, and there was no one that I really knew at tech. I was kind of just on my own. There was no like if I went to, let's say, a local university, I could always come home if things were difficult or I just wasn't feeling right. But when you're like 800 miles away, it's a little bit more difficult. So I was kind of out there on my own, which I wanted to be. I just wanted to see if I could make it.
Okay.
And then when it comes to NYMC, I think at that point I'd realized that, okay, I think after 4 years of being on my own, I can do it. And then I chose NYMC mainly because of the opportunities and the proximity to New York City. So and just the opportunities that it would afford me, tons of hospitals, tons of different populations, like it's a diverse population, kind of the patients that we treat, whether it be in the Bronx or Manhattan or Westchester. It's whole different subsets of populations, so we see a whole different disease profile. So it's just the variety. I think that's what really drew me there.
Okay, good. Yeah, dude, diversity is so important, and I think diversity complements the learning in several ways, and not just with diverse populations. So you said you were in New York City. So my question to you is, how have you been able to matriculate with the COVID-19 pandemic and clinicals and being in New York? How has that interplay between those three variables? How has that played out?
Yeah, it's been very difficult. So I actually started medical school last year before the pandemic started. So that was kind of like normal and baseline, and just comparing last year to this year. So this year completely virtual, all classes are virtual, very few clinical encounters. So basically kind of the way med school works is your third and fourth year are purely clinical. You're in, some rotation site constantly, but first and second year, they kind of try to get your feet wet, but with just the amount of restrictions and the amount of, kind of safeguards that you have to go through, it's been very difficult. Thankfully, our school has been really trying to get us still into clinic somehow, some way. So when I do go back to campus, they're going to start giving us preceptors or mentors that we'll be able to shadow and potentially work with some patients. So it's been very difficult for sure. But I think, you can't avoid the pandemic one way or another, especially if you're trying to go into medicine. It's a reality of life. So, you kind of have to take the right safeguards and just kind of get in there and, do what you can to really make a difference.
Yeah, I agree. You can't avoid every difficulty. You can't avoid. Many times you have to acknowledge it, embrace it, come up with a strategy to deal with it, and progress through it. So, yeah, dude, I agree. Even for me, I'm in graduate school right now, and the pandemic has affected us in terms of the formality of the instruction and even with lab interaction. So I completely agree. So given your responsibilities and accomplishments, how do you maintain a balanced life?
Stress in medical school right now is to avoid physician burnout and maintain some sort of work-life balance, because it's so easy to get lost. And I could definitely get better. I'm not going to say I'm an expert at it at all. But I think for right now, what's worked best for me is just, physically schedule in breaks. Like I turned into a big scheduler. I like to know what my day is going to be. And I schedule breaks, just force myself to take a break somehow, some way. I literally will write down, okay, lunch, go make food, or go take a shower now, it's to that point. I'm also a big sports guy. So thankfully, there are some sports on and they're usually at night. So that's usually when my break is, whenever one of the games is on or something like that. So it's a nice way to kind of schedule my break around something that's already a preset time. But other than that, sometimes you just feel cooped up in my room all day. That's where I do all of my studying. So I just feel, locked in my room all day. So sometimes I'll just go out and run just to like get the blood pumping and just, you know, see the outdoors for the first time in a couple of days. So just physically putting it in my schedule and, you know, forcing myself to do it really, really gets me to take it. And then I think the most important thing is when you're taking your break, fully enjoy it. You know, sometimes what I used to do in undergrad was, okay, I'll watch the game, but I'll also like try to do some studying on the side, some like busy work that I don't really need to pay attention with. And you end up not getting either done. You don't ever watch it fully, and you don't ever get the work done properly. So I think I realized that you need to fully focus. Don't multitask. Don't try to like, you know, do it halfway. Fully enjoy it, and then when you're done, fully get to work.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's good. That's good. That's very good. I might take something to write this down. Because, you know, in several ways, when we decide to rest, I think we should make sure that we're intentional with resting, not trying to, out of guilt, I'm going to do some work on the side as well, or go to the gym. And then you carry a book with you, like a textbook or something like that. So yeah, I completely agree. I'm there with you in terms of making sure you fully rest. So, continuing on, why did you choose biomedical engineering as a field to major in during your undergraduate year? Why did you choose it?
Yeah, so it was actually, you asked me for why I chose it, but it was almost a little bit of indecision. Like I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do coming out of high school. Like I knew that I wanted math to be, like I wanted a big math component of my future career. I also like biology, chemistry, just all of the sciences. So I knew I wanted to do something in there. And when I heard about biomedical engineering, it was a big kind of like a big mishmash of everything. You know, you'd learn this, you'd learn that. You learn a little bit of everything so that you could eventually go do something with it. You know, you're learning all these skills and you're going to take these skills and you can do whatever you want with it. So that not being forced down a specific pathway or not being like, okay, you can only do this one thing really drew me toward biomedical engineering, because it was just, you're going to learn skills. What you do with those skills is up to you. And that's what really drew me towards biomedical engineering, especially at the start.
So the versatility of the skill set. Basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Versatility of the skill set. And you know, for me, what drew me to biomedical engineering was I was interested in device design. So at the time, so those are things that drew me. So why did you choose medicine as a field to do your doctoral studies in?
Yeah.
Why choose medicine? Almost like the med school interview question. Why choose medicine? Why?
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if this is the traditional med school answer, but like I remember for our BME classes towards the end, especially around, I think this was around senior year, for one of the classes, I'll never forget this. So the professor introduced a guest being like, well, this guy has sold his startup for, you know, I don't know, tens or $20 million. So you know you're getting the best educate. You know you're getting the best guy here. I just kind of looked at myself and I was like, is this really how I want to be introduced for the rest of my life, as just how much money I made or how much money I made someone else? I was like, no, I want my self-worth to be valued from what I can do for people, for how much I can help someone. Like, yeah, of course, money is great, but that's not what I want to be known for at the end of the day. That's not, you know, what I want to be remembered for. And that was like the eureka moment of, yeah, I don't think engineering is for me. I was kind of on the fence, and that's what really pushed me towards medicine. Just the idea that your worth is what you can do for someone else. You know, that's what mattered more to me than anything else. And that's why I got into biomedical engineering. Like I imagined the day where like I'd be in my own office, you know, designing devices for patients, you know, working with them, working with their lifestyles. And the more I learned about biomedical engineering, the more it just wasn't like that. And the more medicine was turning out to be like that, where it's, you know, you're working with patients to come up with solutions. You know, it's not just the general, you know, okay, I'm the doctor, listen to me. You're working with the patient to come up with the solution that's best for them. Like, I have the information, but you're the expert in your own life. So let's work together to come up with a solution for that. That's what I realized, like, that's what I wanted. And that's what I'm getting from medicine. And that's why I chose medicine, and I'm so happy I stuck with that choice for that reason.
Right, that's very good. I completely agree. It's not this and I agree in several ways. Our self-worth should be tied to intrinsic core values and not just monetary descriptors. Even though in many ways people say your net worth is tied to those monetary descriptors.
Yeah.
But your self-worth, I think, should be tied to core values. That's just my perspective, and it seems like it's yours as well. So, along the same line, what advice do you have to those wanting to pursue the field you are currently studying in? So you just said that you're interested in medicine, and your interest is tied to how you want to help people and how you want there to be a dialogue in the clinical environment in which both of you approach the situation, you with your expertise, the patient with their situation, expert in how they're feeling, and you come to some beneficial conclusion. So what advice do you have to those wanting to pursue the field you're currently studying in?
Yeah, so there's a lot of kind of aspects to that. So I guess the first thing that I would say is, yes, it's great that you want to help someone, and I'm sure that's the core of everyone who wants to go into medicine. Yes, we all want to help people, but if that's the only reason you're going into medicine may not be it for you. There has to be some sort of kind of selfish motivator that's driving you towards medicine. And for me, it was the constantly learning, constantly developing. Like I want to be a better person 10 years from now than I am today. I want to be much better. And medicine allows me to do that. So I would say really make sure that medicine is for you, because it's a long grind, you know, from the day you enter medical school till the day you get your first real job is probably close to like 10 years. So to go through 10 years of school and then residency and then fellowship or whatever extra schooling you want to do, you have to make sure that there's something in it for you, that there's some internal gain that you are getting from medicine that no other field can give you. And that's what will really drive you to be the best physician or whatever role of healthcare you want to be. Other than that, you know, be patient and be persistent. You know, it's a long grind. Like a lot of people, what they do is they go into a career right out of college, and then once they're done with that, they choose to commit to medical school. So there's no real rush, you know, being like, I have to go straight into medical school right out of undergrad. Absolutely not. The average, I think the average age of my incoming class was 27. So if you're graduating around 23, 24, you know, people have worked for a couple of years. A lot of students have children, have families. So, you know, like have a life outside of medical school. If you want to have a life before medical school, that's absolutely fine. You know, just be patient. You know, if you have to apply multiple times, if you have to redo some coursework, redo the MCAT, it's all perfectly fine. You know, it's a long journey. No one really cares if you did it right the first time. Just do the best that you can in every aspect. Yeah, that's basically it.
Good, that's good. Being patient and persistent, because at the end of the day, we're all on a journey, and also our paths are different. So just because one person went to medical school in 2 years after undergrad, or 1 year, or did the traditional, or just went directly after, doesn't mean you have to do the same.
Absolutely. All that matters is the care that you can give to the patient. So whatever gets you to do the best for that, that's all that matters. Doesn't matter what path you take. You said that perfectly.
Yeah. So, Keshav, what has been some of the most beneficial advice you have received?
So advice that I've received. So I wouldn't say this has been explicitly told to me, but I think what all of my mentors have tried to really emphasize upon me or get me to do it. I think the best way to sum it up is, you know, fall in love with the process of becoming great. You know, really enjoy really enjoy the kind of struggle that you're going through now. You know, it's for some other bigger picture goal. Like, yes, me, you know, studying right now is to eventually become a doctor. But if I don't enjoy it now, I'm not going to enjoy being that physician. I'm not going to enjoy the work that I'm eventually going to have to do. So really enjoy the struggle, the hard work, all the skills and experiences that you're learning, all the kind of mistakes that you make throughout the process, because that's what you're eventually going to learn from. You learn more from your mistakes than all of your successes. So really just enjoy that process. Get good at just getting back up after you make a mistake, and keep going. That's the only way that you're going to learn. And I think people showing me that really taught me to be persistent and taught me to just keep going no matter what, because that's the only right thing to do. Just keep going.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's important to embrace the struggle and our process to become doctors, lawyers, accountants, professors, technicians. It's important to be a person of value, not just someone who can bring value and someone who has core values and who lives with them. Yes, and I think it's also important to watch out for the destination fallacy, in which you think, I must arrive to this place, then I'll be happy. Or I must arrive to this next phase, then I'll be happy.
Absolutely.
And, yeah, dude. So my last question for you, Keshav, before we conclude, perfect scenario. Given this pandemic, I take it we all have had situations where we could say, I wish something was a little different. If you had to come up with a perfect scenario in the next 5 years, what would it be? Within the context of your medical education and life, what would it be?
Well, that's a great question. And I think my first, I don't know if this would be my answer maybe in a couple of days, but my first gut reaction went to kind of something that I've been thinking about for a while, is that this whole pandemic has kind of taught all of us the importance of health and hygiene, just taking everything very seriously. It's very easy to catch a cold or, catch the flu. We see how easy it is to catch COVID just from, going outside, going to a restaurant. You could still be masked up and you would take all the proper precaution. You could still catch a virus. So I think the perfect situation for me right now is that we all take our health a lot more seriously. We understand how fragile it is and how truly important and precious our health is, and how much we need to take care of it for the long term. I think for me right now, that's the answer that I would say is a perfect scenario.
Oh, that's good. It's important for everyone to realize that their health and your health is very important. So, Keshav, thanks again for joining me today. It is good to have you on. It was good to have you on. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the podcast series, The New Student Pharmacist, where we discuss chemistry and pharmacy, as well as leaders in pharmacy careers, community, and chemistry and pharmacy research. We encourage you to support the work we are doing and follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts by subscribing for free. We are so glad that you were able to tune in today. Note, the views on the podcast represent those of my guest, and I take care and all the best.